ready to get after it now for the afternoon. Really enjoyed connecting with several of you during our break in the morning, and feel free to continue to reach out. Like as I said at the top when we started, the participants, the panelists that are here, that are giving of their time, which we so appreciate. Part of the fun and really the attraction is being able to give back, because we were all in that position at one time, and they really enjoy the direct connection with you guys. So as a reminder, when we're discussing our subject today, and to be about sports media this afternoon, then we do the sports law one a little bit later, but just feel free to make it interactive. Jump in, ask questions, just use the raised hand function so I can kind of keep track of who wants to jump in and ask a question. Make a comment too. It doesn't have to be a question, just make a comment, or make it in chat, that's fine. I'm really excited about this. Obviously, sports media is a primary area of mine and specialty, something I've been involved with. I've been on both the sports business and sports media sides, and the landscape is so changing now. And there's been this major shift to digital, and this panel is just such a great compilation of professionals that have had experience in different areas of sports media, and that's why I'm so excited about this group. So I'll introduce them now. Andrea Hagman, who everybody knows as Andy, with her award-winning smile, who's been a shining light since she was a student of mine at USC. I was so grateful to have her in my sports business media class. She's deputy news director at Sports Illustrated and has been at NFL.com. Has had a variety of experiences already in her young career. Left USC and got her master's degree at Georgetown in sports industry management. So a few of you asked about sports management programs. Andy went off to Georgetown and is now at Sports Illustrated. Michael Duarte is a sports writer for NBC LA. So it's covering the LA teams for NBC Sports, but specifically in LA. So the digital side, and went to Cal Berkeley, and his writing is kind of known for having a sharp wit in how he covers sports. You cover it differently today. It's not just about the results, what happened. It's why it happened and how to tell great stories. And Michael took one of those non-linear paths and ended up coming to USC for grad school in screenwriting and creative writing. So I'm not surprised that his writing reflects that sharp wit with his background. He was also sports editor of the Latin Times, which is an online and print publication for the bilingual Latino community across the globe. Shay Dawson, she just brings energy and joy to every event, every meeting that she's in. I met her at the Sports Business Classroom program, which is tied into the NBA Summer League in Las Vegas. And she just shot out of the cannon, and got an opportunity to go to the Philadelphia 76ers and athlete relations. And she's now in New York as the director of athlete and community relations for Overtime, which is, that's the digital sports network that's focused on high school athletes, basketball and football, and definitely made headlines this week with the announcement they were starting a basketball league for 16 to 18-year-olds that pays upwards of $100,000 per year. That's started by Overtime, which is a network that among the investors are Kevin Durant, Carmelo Anthony. So it's a really interesting story, just really jumped into the digital world. And Danny Corrales is our producer of the wildly popular weekday ESPN show, The Jump, the home for all hoop heads. All things NBA, Rachel Nichols. He was while he was an undergrad at the University of Arizona, he was the recruiting manager for over those period of years while he was an undergrad. He got right involved with the basketball program for the Hall of Fame coach Lute Olson, and has taken that interest in basketball and made it a career, now working at The Jump for ESPN. Justin Threet is the Senior Director of Sales and Business Operations for Fox Sports. So Justin brings the sensibilities related to the business side of sports media. And he was at Ohio State and then came to USC in international relations and business marketing, and graduated from the Marshall School of Business, where Ron Roberts is connected to. So we'll get sort of the business side of sports media from Justin. So thank you so much, everybody, for taking the time to do this. Really excited. Andy, I just want to start with you. You know, SI has gone through this evolution, morphed into now a monthly publication. Your deputy news director. What's been your view now of the landscape and the changing landscape in sports media that you're really a part of now, for what was a mainstream magazine, and it's now really undergone a change and a different kind of emphasis. So welcome.
And definitely in just the past year since I've been there, there's been just a transformation of direction, and especially adapting to the challenges of COVID and everybody being remote. We also launched our paywall last month, and it's done exponentially well. Continue to subscribe, everybody, and help us continue to pump out great content. And it's interesting because I work on the breaking news side of Sports Illustrated. So we are the free content right now. So it's also making sure that we are hitting those hard-hitting stories, and also making sure that we're also bringing in the other sides of sports, especially with our extra mustard content, and making sure that the zany side that people want to click on, that you're on Twitter and you're seeing that Shaq said this or did this the other night. You want to read more and go to our site, and then you look around and you're like, oh, you know what, I want to subscribe. So I think just everybody adapting and the challenges of coronavirus, as I mentioned, and it's been an interesting role in coming into this, especially coming from NFL.com and a different type of digital media, and seeing how SI handles things news-wise, and then also just trying to compete with The Athletic and CBS Sports and other ESPN and other entities. Right.
Great. Well, thank you, Andy. Michael, what's your take? What's your view right now on the sports media landscape, and and maybe tell students about sort of your role at in a local market, yet working for NBC Sports, but in LA, covering the LA teams.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. First, as you mentioned, the sports media market as a whole is moving in the direction of digital. We went from, the way we were telling stories a lot in print and on broadcast and on television, to now it's 24/7 with the advent of social media, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. It's around the clock. People are breaking news, and we're getting sports news everywhere at all hours. There's no stop to it. And so us as sports media have to adapt to that as well, and be able to tell stories, report information, and get it done in quick sound bites and bites now, and get it quickly and as fast as possible to all of our social media, digital, online, wherever we can get the information so that people can have it. And the way people are consuming information now and getting these information and watching sports and watching highlights and stuff is always ever changing as well. For me personally at NBC, LA and Los Angeles, as you mentioned, I'm lucky that I came in on the digital side. Obviously my background is in writing, and even when I was at Newsweek and the Latin Times, that was digital based as well. So I came in from that side, and then through that was able to get some broadcast experience as well, doing reporting. I had a couple shows that were both digital and broadcast, as far as getting to know players on these local teams, on the Dodgers, on the Lakers, on the Rams. So that's what I do in my role. And for me personally, it's a juggling act, because it is a local market, as you mentioned, but it's the second biggest market in the country. And we have arguably more sports teams, I believe, than any other, even New York. So It's a juggling act as far as what is the most important at any given time. And what was so interesting about the COVID pandemic year was we went almost 3 months without any sports. And then it seemed like all the sports conversion began and started up again at the same time. So having to pick and choose and cover the Lakers and the Dodgers and the Rams and everything at the same time, it's a juggling act, and you try to find your audience and find out what they want and get that to them as quickly and as informatively as possible.
I feel like that Southern California in particular separates maybe from other parts of the country too, because it doesn't just have great, rich pro sports, but you have the combination of pro sports and college at the highest level, and even the high school stories. And I love high school sports. I'm, out there almost every Friday night at a high school football game, and as a Heisman voter, I feel like I'm seeing the future in front of me. So you have that. You have just that extra layer of sports and stories to tell with college and high school at a really high level. Danny, what about you at the Jump and what ESPN is doing and catering to the audiences they do, really filling a need that for daily programming that's live and really in the moment?
Yeah, so I've been at ESPN since 2008. So when I came in, it was cable television, ESPN, things, the legacy media was kind of at an all-time high. We were probably, I think, in our most households at that time. But obviously, things have changed, right? And not only are we creating, I produce a linear cable television show every day, but we also have so many shoulder kind of platforms that we have a podcast every day. We're clipping off segments and taping segments for YouTube. We're taping segments for Tencent. So what I've noticed is that there's kind of two different types of viewers for the Jump. And to be honest, most of the people who are joining us from college aren't on the cable side of the equation. So people are seeing the Jump digitally, just like they would see, obviously with Sports Illustrated or even NBC local. So we're competing in that platform, but also catering to our bread and butter, which is cable television, linear television, and what people call the legacy media. So it is a bit of a balancing act, even from us on the day-to-day, because we understand people are getting their highlights from Twitter, we understand, or IG, stuff like that. We understand that there's an abundance of content, especially in the sports space, and there's a bunch of podcasts and things like that. So I think our job is to give the NBA diehard the best NBA show with a mix of video, of discussion, of breaking news, of looking at last night, but also looking ahead to tonight's games. And it's like the struggle every single day, right? And that's part of the fun of the job. And that's, to be honest, why we do our job every day, because there is a question as what should lead the show, and how should we handle breaking news. I was in the chair when the Tigers stuff happened. And, at that moment, when we started our show, we were not the NBA show. We were the Tiger Woods update show. And, and it put us in an interesting spot, because we wanted to give people the news that really mattered to them. But we also didn't have a ton of news at that time to give. Right. So, these kind of conversations and these things happen every day. And I'm really fortunate that I get to produce for ESPN, have the real estate we have as a daily NBA show, which we didn't have in that capacity. We had a nightly highlight show, but never an NBA news and information type show. So I'm been blessed to work on it from the beginning, help create it, and honestly help it evolve, because really we want to get to all of the audience that enjoys the NBA, not necessarily just the cable audience. So that's a big part of our push.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great example too, to bring up what happened with Tiger Woods with the accident, of just how you have to be nimble and how you have to pivot. And it became a sports story, not just a golf story, and incorporated into your show, which was great work. Shay, how are you? It's great to see you. Overtime. Tell us about your role at Overtime, and you guys are stirring it up. It's awesome to see.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Yesterday, today, kind of crazy. So sorry if you see me looking down. I'm just multitasking. Yes. Because when Ron asked me to do this, we hadn't announced yet, and we kind of moved things around. So hey, Ron, and thanks for having me. Jeff, thanks for having me always. I love talking to this community. So I'm head of athlete relations at Overtime. I came from the league with a player first mentality, and I knew that the world was heading into just the sports media, digital media. That's where kind of the focus was for the younger generation. And I left the NBA just because I realized it was too late if I was trying to make an impact on their lives. And so I had to go where their attention was. And when I went to an event called the Takeover in Brooklyn, I got to experience Overtime just as a fan, as a supporter. My younger brother was playing in the game that they had invited him to, and they had figured out community, which was the kids from the neighborhood. It was all boroughs in New York. I mean, they were throwing up the O, their energy was crazy. The adults were not trying to hold them back from jumping on the court or moving from station to station, or it was like the adults were there, but it was a controlled chaos that I love to see kids genuinely having fun. And I know that's not how we do it at the NBA. It's very controlled, it's very systematic. And I love the TikTok. And so I don't know if people in the executive team were like, okay, we don't understand that. And so I felt like Overtime understood me. And I left leaving the Takeover like, oh yeah, I'm going to work there at that company. And then they had the influencers, they had the elite talent, which are like the next generation. So I was like, yeah, I think I want to do this versus doing, working at the NBA, even though I'm working with NBA players and executives and GMs that everyone views, as these highly touted people, which they are. But I also think there's an element missing in the NBA of just like having fun. And I wanted to have fun, and I also wanted to do my job at the same time. So I ended up at Overtime. And didn't know, it was the road less traveled by. I actually interviewed at Minnesota as their assistant GM and pro scout for the G League team, which would be a step up for my career. But I also was like, damn, it's still the NBA though. I'm still not going to get that feel that I want. And so I ended up turning it down. And I couldn't even believe what I was saying over the phone when I was turning it down. And I said, I'm going to choose Overtime, which was a path, not familiar to me. But kind of understanding how my brother really loved Overtime. He talked about it all the time, and I just didn't understand who Overtime Larry was and what Overtime Larry did. And when I met Overtime Larry and his infectious smile and his personality, I was like, dang, this is kind of the energy I want to be around. And I created my position back on the train from New York to Philly. And then I knew if I got an opportunity to speak to somebody, I would pitch it. And I said, hey, everything I do at the NBA, I'm trying to do for you guys, which is to be there for players day to day, everything they need. Be the liaison between our company and, talk to the parents, let them know what we're thinking, kind of get their input on it and kind of marry the two worlds just to create like a long-term transaction versus just a transaction where we do some content and no longer speak to them again. So that's where we're at now, which is kind of, where you see us going. And then we're also we're focused on the next generation of sports fans, which is why people don't understand sometimes what we do. We hear what our community is saying. We listen to them. We're in the comments every day. We respond to everything on Instagram, on YouTube. So we're not really worried about the adults. We're worried about the kids because one day they're going to be adults and they're going to be driving the market. And so that's kind of what we're focused on. That's our secret sauce.
So what's just really briefly, Shay, just give us a quick overview of Overtime. And, it comes into the sports media space trying to, carve out its own niche. And so what's really the vision for Overtime and what's there for, for sports fans?
Yeah, we see the way that, Generation Z consumes content. They don't watch TV. They stream everything. They're on Twitch, they're on TikTok, they're on YouTube. There's no commercials for YouTube, and all the kids around the world, no matter where you go in the world, to Dubai, to Texas, they all know the same, shows on YouTube. And so that's kind of what we're focused on. It's like, we want to be that sports, consumption for them. We want to be that hub where they go to find out everything. And then we also want them to be able to watch their favorite players grow up, as they ascend to college, to the NBA, and they get to be within that whole entire time and they get to watch their development. And that's kind of what happens. Like with my younger brother, he has a show on Overtime, which is another reason why I wanted to come to Overtime, because I was like, what are you guys doing with us? What are you doing with these kids? And so even from the time they started, which is last year when we start filming with them, he's a completely different person now. And so just seeing him develop, and the fans can follow him and say, I remember when Mikey had braces. Now he has twisties, and now, he has tattoos. And so I think there is a kind of a secret in that, is where just watching them, growing with them, being with them. And then you can also envision yourself being him one day, or being a girl on our channel on Overtime WBB. Like, you can actually envision yourself becoming one of these, viral stars or digital stars. And so that's kind of, what we're focused on and where we're going.
focused on the young athlete, the high school athlete. And of course, I've loved that for years. I've always felt
the next generation of sports fans. That's
perfect.
Yeah,
that sounds great.
Yep.
Justin Threet from involved in sales and business operations at Fox Sports. Welcome. I'm wondering what your view right now is of this changing media landscape, working for one of the sports powerhouses, Fox Sports, and kind of what your take is now and going forward a little bit.
Well, thank you for having me. You guys are all great, everyone here, especially the panelists. Love all that you're doing. I'm I guess a silent fan of many of the things you guys are doing. So love sports, love, all that you guys are doing. I love the jump, love Sports Illustrated, like huge sports fan. So I feel like I am, amongst great company here. In regards to the, landscape, I echo a lot of the, sentiments across the board. I think it just spills into, business as well as the creative. Linear TV is our bread and butter, obviously, but we've reached a partnership with, say, Blue Wire podcasting, for instance, over the last couple of months. Streaming over the last 3 years, we've jumped into, which has been, extremely profitable, not only just like from a monetary standpoint, but from a fan standpoint. Like our goal is to, surround the fan with, the content that they want and how they want to receive it. So, like Shay said, people are, receiving content digitally. So we want to be in that space as well. And we are in that space, so much so that we're expanding into more of the collegiate properties realm, the multimedia rights realm. We've reached a partnership with Impression Sports as well for like jersey patch rights. So anything where it's more so in person, more so, catered to the actual fan, that's what we're, relying upon for our business growth right now. Yes, we still, rely heavily upon, linear television, linear sports, because that's where the games are. But we're trying to broaden that scope to bring in, the younger fan or the fan that doesn't want to sit there and watch, television all day. They're on the go, they're on the move, but they still want to be connected. We want to cater to those fans as well.
So Justin, your sort of career trajectory and arc, was it always going to be business focused? So many of the students that I get are thinking, media, whether it's in front of the camera or behind, or storytelling. Like, what was it for you when you were where those students are today that are watching here, and you were sitting in their seat? What was your vision for what you thought you would be doing?
I think my vision was just to be around something that I love and figure out the capacity along the way. But rule number one was to be around something that I truly love. So I didn't feel like it was a job. So the learning process is going to be just that, no matter what you do. But if you do something that you love, and I know it's cliche, you do something that you love, that learning process, I mean, it just gets amplified because you want more. You want to be satiated. Like, it just keeps going. And the more it goes, the more the pathway opens up. And you say, okay, I can go this way or go that way, but it becomes your choice. You begin to have options because your confidence grows. You're like, okay, I can go this route, or I can take a chance, I'll bet on myself and go this route. But the thematic of sports or whatever it is you love, is that beacon of light. So you feel like comforted in that. So I started a bit on the production side. Like, I had an internship at NFL Network, worked for free, had another job while I was working to actually, pay the light bill and things like that. I was in college. But it was just like, look, I want to be around things that I love. And it was actually at the time when the NFL Network was launching. It was the summer of their launch. They had one studio. They were building out 2 other studios. They didn't have like real jobs for everyone to do. So I just found my way, try to create my own value within that ecosystem. I would build, PowerPoint decks for, the marketing folks that would go up to Oregon to present to Nike. I would, as you know, at the NFL, there's a lot of turnover year over year in the summer. So I would manage all the team profiles, like the personnel profiles, but that wasn't something that was told for me to do. I just was like, hey, look, I'm keeping track of this stuff anyway because I'm a fan. Are you guys keeping track of it? And how are you keeping track of it? They're like, oh yeah, we just print out articles and throw them in a folder. I'm like, okay, well, I'll figure out a way to make it more, concise and succinct. Went that route, because other interns were logging game tape. So they were in a corner in a dark room, logging game tape. I'm like, well, I can do more. You're not paying me anyway, so I'll do more, and just figured it out from there and made connections and realized, when I went into my senior year, it's like, okay, number one, I can do this. I can be in sports. And number two, I want to be in sports. So let's figure it out. So I had a little bit of a runway.
You created value. That's so important, the way you put it too. I talk about a lot about what is your value add. I would ask the students to think about that themselves. What is your value add? What are you going to bring to the table wherever you are? How do you separate yourself? I think the sooner that you start thinking that, Justin, just like you did, the sooner that you can start to see areas where maybe you have a special skill, or you can develop expertise, something like that. And Andy and Michael, feel free to jump in. I wanted to talk about storytelling, since you guys are heavy on that side of it, how that's evolved. And starting with you, Andy, just because at the traditionally mainstream outlet like Sports Illustrated, coming from the NFL, what's your take on the kinds of stories, or how you want to tell them now at SI? And then Michael, feel free to pop in on that one too as well.
Well, for myself, like coming from NFL.com, where some stories, to be quite honest, we couldn't post on the site. It would have to go through several people to approve if it involved certain players, if it was a very sensitive story, team owners. So when I came to SI, it was a big culture change for me, where we could actually be open about what's going on, and there wasn't kind of this shroud of secrecy, for lack of a better phrase. And this is all off the record, I just want to say that. So coming to SI, where you really, it was like, oh, we can do this, we can do that. There's not sponsorship obligations necessarily at NFL, where it's an entity where you can't have something that's some player doing an Instagram post and it has a Mercedes-Benz in the picture or something. Like there are certain things where there's it would conflict with the overall sponsorship opportunities and things like that. In SI, we have a little bit more leniency where we can cover stories. Of course, there are some things where if it is a promotional thing, we're not necessarily going to give Gatorade free press and be doing a story on something that's clearly an advertisement for them. So, and that's something too that we have to look at, of like, what is this post that Russell Wilson's doing? Is this an advertisement for something, or is he legit actually just enjoying this product? So it's interesting going from different entities, and then also coming from a production background too, like Justin, and kind of learning different facets of the business. And at SI, with over the past year, there's been some organizational changes as well, and different visions that are kind of being tested out, and especially with the new paywall and this premium content, and just trying to figure out what are people engaging with, whether it's on these new social media platforms like TikTok. Within the past year and a half has really taken off, and people, brands, and just individuals are really making a name for themselves, promoting that content, engaging with a new audience. And then also with Clubhouse too. I'm 30, I still don't understand Clubhouse. So if anybody wants to explain that to me, feel free to drop. I have a membership, everything. I still don't understand the point, but feel free to explain it. And then also with Dispo, and I got sent another one the other day, and it was something I was like, wait, there's so many different ways to engage with your audiences. And I really feel for social media managers and people that are working in social media, having to just try to, and also in production too, of like, okay, where are people posting things like, okay, JJ Watt the other day announced he was signing with the Cardinals, wearing a Cardinals shirt. And it's like, who is managing where are we getting our information from, and who's in competing with other entities, and then now competing with the players themselves for putting out this information and breaking news. Kind of going on different tangents here, but so I think it's just kind of adaptability and just trying to figure out what's working and what your competitors are doing, and just trying to see like what also maintains the integrity of your brand too. SI, which is an esteemed brand and known for their covers. We launched the daily cover last year. That's been highly successful. It runs, I believe, Monday through Friday, and I
really like that, by the way.
Oh yeah,
I think
thanks.
That's a great.
And it pays homage to what SI is known for, and those iconic covers, and promoting those athletes and giving them that showcase. And so I think just trying to figure out what works for your brand, but also being able to adapt to the change in times and change in technology is something that I'm trying to bring forth to SI, and especially being a younger person in a newsroom, and trying to see what people are engaging with and what's not necessarily the most important thing to highlight.
Yeah. Michael, how have you adapted? How was that process?
Yeah, Jeff. Well, first of all, I want to say you're doing a great job, because you're hitting on points like knowing your value and storytelling. And I kind of went into this saying, I'm going to be the guy that talks about storytelling is the most important thing about sports media, or being a sports writer, or being a sports reporter, because at the end of the day, that's what we do. And so one thing I want to say, as far as when people ask me, what advice would I give? I just did a podcast the other day with 2 college students at the University of Albany, and that's the question they asked: what advice would I give them for wanting to be in sports media? And I said, master the art of storytelling. Don't worry about the sports. Don't worry about the vocabulary, the players, the names, those things. That will come as you get into it. Master the art of storytelling. And how do you do that? That's the question. Instead of just saying to do it, how do we do it? And so knowing your audience, to me, is one of the most important things. And that's kind of, when you say, how is it changing and evolving, and how am I adapting? It is knowing my audience and how they're consuming the stories that I'm telling. And one of the things about being in Los Angeles is knowing, yes, that my market, my audience is going to be Lakers fans, Dodgers fans, Rams fans, but also knowing that those fan bases are extremely diverse here in Los Angeles and coming from all walks of life, all backgrounds, and all cultures. And I need to know that when I'm telling the story. One way it's evolving and changing is telling a story in 15 seconds on a TikTok video, or 60 seconds in an Instagram snippet, or 2 minutes in Twitter, and then trying to get them to send them to the larger version of the story that I'm trying to tell, which may be an article on NBC, or maybe a longer video on NBC LA that they can go check out. So knowing your audience is very important in mastering the art of storytelling, and then engaging them. Why do they care about this particular story that you're going to tell, whether it's about a team, or about an athlete, or about a player, or about a coach, or someone in the front office? So being able to engage them, being able to grab them, being able to be creative with that, and how you're going to tell the story is important as well. And then finally, I always say, end with a grand finale. So I always like to end my story either on a happy note, or an optimistic note, or a positive thing that can lead things to the future, even if I'm telling a story that has a lot of triumphs and tribulations and dark times throughout it. So that would be my advice to people. And you brought up storytelling, Jeff, so I wanted to hit on that. As far as for you students listening and watching, don't worry about the sport so much. Worry about telling the best stories, and you will go far in your career.
That's such great advice, Michael. And that's why I always say that it's not really about getting into the business, how much you know about a sport. Like, everybody thinks that, and especially I get this early in my class during a typical semester, sometimes from women, like, I don't know as much about sports as my dad or brother or boyfriend or whatever. And said, it's not really about that, whether the media side or the business side. It's about those other things, the intangibles. Are you a good communicator? Do you have the work ethic? Are you curious? Are you competitive? All of those things are what matter most. You can usually learn enough about the sport to cover it, but it's those other areas where I think you'll separate. And so, great thoughts. So, Danny, do you have anything in that area, just for this evolution of, storytelling is done the way you do it on daily television, network television?
Yeah, no, storytelling is a huge component. I mean, if you think about what people are going, what people want, right? I'm sorry, but my breaking about that.
Yeah. Feedback. Yeah.
Sorry about that. My pods are dying. Let me go podless. I'm sorry. All right. So what I was saying is that, there's different components to what people want from content. They either want news and information, which, kind of includes highlights, stuff like that, or storytelling. And storytelling is such an important component of what we do because, sports change, the sports landscape changes even within a specific sport. And it's important to cover LeBron and Steph Curry and Kevin Durant, but it's also important to kind of tell people who's coming next and talk about Luka, talk about Zion, talk about Ja. And, even a team like the Jazz, right, who are on fire, they're not the biggest fan base or the most popular fan base from like a national audience perspective. But how can we tell the story of the Jazz this season in a way that's compelling and unique and that can help make Donovan Mitchell a household name or Rudy Gobert a household name and really help drive awareness to that team, which could very well be playing the Lakers in the finals. Like it's easy to talk, in the Western Conference Finals, I should say. It's easy to talk about the Lakers. It's easy to talk about LeBron most days. But even with that, there's such a saturation of that content. Like what story are you going to talk about with LeBron that's going to be unique? What story could you get being a local reporter that a national reporter couldn't get? And I think it's just really interesting to find those. I think the word Michael brought up was curiosity. I'm sorry, I think you brought up, Jeff, was curiosity. Yeah. And I'm sure, Michael, that's where you're getting to. Is what makes you curious to tell that story in the beginning? And I think the curiosity, when it comes from diversity, it brings more stories to the forefront. And I think that's an interesting component when you think about, as a student right now, what's my perspective? How do I look at sports? How do I look at politics or whatever, right? It doesn't have to just be sports. What is it unique in my perspective that I can then share? And maybe other people will be like, wow, that's actually kind of my perspective too. And I'm really glad you told that story.
Yeah. One question, we're kind of winding down a little bit here. I can't believe how fast this has gone, but you guys have all been tremendous. Taking notes fast and furious myself. Woody was asking about how the pandemic has impacted what you're doing. How is it? I mean, maybe Shay, I'll start with you and with a newer sports entity, only been around since 2016. Was it especially significant in trying to build audience and build a following? And then anybody else wants to kind of weigh in on the effect of COVID.
Yeah, so surprisingly, I mean, and first when everything happened, of course, we were all panicked. We were all like, wait, what? Like, we need to be out in the world. We need to be shooting content or we just were like, so thinking one way. And then once we accepted the change, we took a deep breath and we had a company meeting and we had department meetings and then division head meetings. Like we were like, okay, that's okay. Change is normal. It's natural. Like, how do we handle this? And so once we started to think about it, well, I mean, wow, like we can just stay at home and like meet with like thousands of people like in one day versus like schedule it out over the time where you have to fly to a certain city. We started to realize that was going to be how we were going to just attack things. Like, I mean, we had way more calls with brands than we had before. People were much busier when you could be out because people were scheduling lunches and things where they just told people, you're not going to have my time. And I think it was more normal to kind of like eat and meet, versus separating the two. So I think all of us we have a Slack channel that just like top of mind. We just literally it's like Twitter, but internally. Mm-hmm. And coming up with ideas. Like everyone just got really innovative, really creative on ways to connect with the outside world and what we should do on Zoom. Should we play music before? Should we not? Like we had like all these like different things that we tried. And for me, I would say like in terms of just building relationships with athletes, it made them more comfortable to be at home in their space, to talk to them versus meeting with them in person. So I was actually able to scale my athlete relationships and my athlete just support. So anybody who supports an athlete, I was actually able to meet with them and schedule more meetings to the point where when I wanted to talk to someone, they literally automatically thought I was talking about video. And I was like, we can just have a call, like no pressure. So I found myself calling some people, videoing a lot of people. And I would say we were able to scale our relationships with the external community in the brand space, you know, with athletes, just kind of anyone and even each other. I met with more people that I kind of never worked with in the company that I had before. So we just adapted, we changed up, you know, our personalities, and like, we just literally went within and said, this is what we're going to do. We're at home. I think I felt more for Dan and Zach, who are, you know, our co-founders, for paying rent on a building we're not using. I mean,
right.
You know what I mean? Like, we kind of just were like, do we even go back? What do we do? And so, yeah, that's kind of how we adapted. It was just, yeah. And we were able to scale and do it better, and just kind of crank more content. We repurposed a lot of content. We did a lot of things, you know, like which would take, I feel like, longer if we were in our normal, because we just slow roll it. But now we were like, you know, just content dump. How can we just keep our fans engaged while they were at home? And we did also a lot of like self-care check-ins with our people, because we have a lot of young community. So like, how are you feeling? And we did a lot of private Zooms, a lot of overtime VIP things that really kind of amplified like just our heart into the world. So I think just having that element of like fast go content, more, and then also like, wait, how are you feeling? So constantly checking in, but constantly like providing and dumping content into the universe. So yeah.
Got it. Great. Couple of great questions, and maybe we can get to, I'm thinking, Michael, if you don't mind responding Adrian's question, maybe you can even just do it in chat as we're wrapping it up. But it's a really good question about how you keep your audience engaged throughout a story. Is it a mixture of facts, opinions, conspiracies? Mentioning the latest LA Times article about Clayton Kershaw, his retirement comes to mind. I'm thinking you might be able to offer some thoughts there. Maybe you could just.
Yeah, and I wanted to also step in, Jeff, because I don't know as far as the other panelists, but I believe I'm probably the only one of our panel who's actually been to the sporting events live during this pandemic. So covering the Lakers still at Staples Center without fans, being at Dodger Stadium without fans, being at the $5 billion SoFi Stadium without fans, and just how different it is. There are pros and cons about it, but for me as a sports writer and reporter, and I'll segue that into the question that Adrian asked, it's nice being able, like, as we were having this conversation on a separate Zoom, I had Clayton Kershaw, who just pitched or is pitching tomorrow, I believe, you know, in his debut against the Royals. So I had that and him answering questions, as you just ironically mentioned, Clayton Kershaw, Jeff, on one Zoom over here as we're doing this career discussion too. So it makes it easier, where before I couldn't do that. I would have to be in Arizona to ask Clayton Kershaw questions about his first start of spring. But so that's good and that's nice and that's easier. But what for me personally is I'm losing the interpersonal relationships, which are so important in my job as a sports writer and sports storyteller. So I'm not able to hang out with LeBron James after a game and talk about wine or talk about his kids or talk about some restaurant recommendations in LA, having been born and raised here and him only been here a couple of years. I don't get that anymore. I get 5 minutes with him on Zoom after a game and that's it. And maybe I'll get to ask a question if there's the time, and maybe I don't. And so that's tough. And then to lead into the question about as far as how do I know what the audience wants to engage in, that kind of revolves around the things I know that are trending. I also look at like the trending stories and things that are happening. And so if something, I try to be a reporter who is not necessarily old school in the way where it's just about, you know, how did your pitches come out, Clayton Kershaw? How did they feel today? What are people talking about on social media? What do they want to know and what do they want to ask? And I try to be that caveat, that intermediary between the two, to get the questions to the players, because I have that access that most people don't. Whereas this is what the larger audience is wanting to know about. And if it is, like you said, is he going to retire at the end of the year? Is he going to sign an extension with the Dodgers, or is he going to go sign with the Rangers so he can be closer to home? I can then ask Clayton that myself and then relay that information back. And that's part of, like I said, knowing what the audience wants and engaging and being able to tell it in different ways and on different mediums and as quickly as possible.
Great. Excellent. Great answer. The last question, it was so important that Tomiko asked it. How does one know their value, or how can you teach someone who's just starting out or don't know what they want to do? It really goes back to, Justin covered this, and I mentioned about creating, your value add. to me, and Justin, you feel free, and we'll wrap here, but to add to this, but I just feel it's something when someone's starting out, you just have to, nothing can take the place of experience, of just going through and figuring out what it is that, you know, where you find your value. It's just, you know, it's like just trial and error of just, what is it? Try different things. Like, you know, opportunities come along. You're not sure if you're how good, what kind of a fit it is. Do it anyway, and then find out. And it evolves. It doesn't happen overnight.
It's a good question, because I get where it's coming from a perspective standpoint. So the cool thing about value is that you get to create it, right? Somebody can't tell you what you're worth. You get to determine what you're worth. So it's a confidence thing. So use the fact that you're just starting out as an opportunity to learn what everyone does, and then pick aspects of each that you can either begin to do or learn more about. Then you can start using that as leverage to move into spaces, get your seat at the table, and then you continue to do the same thing. So it doesn't stop. You know, even if you're the vice president or the president, it doesn't stop. You keep finding areas in which you can continue to grow and increase your value, and get yourself into spaces where your opinion matters from a strategic standpoint and an execution standpoint. That's, you know, at least my advice from my perspective.
Yeah, that's terrific. Tamiko, I think you're asking on behalf of your daughter. I just say, you know, avail yourself of any opportunities that come along, get involved, and you know, and have your daughter see where she feels like she's going to be able to be at her best. You know, where she's going to be able to add the most value. It just happens. It happens over time. I don't think it happens right away. You guys, thank you so much. This has been tremendous. I've learned so much from all of you, and I love the energy that everybody brings. Andy, Michael, Shay, Danny, Justin, thank you for giving of your time for us, and keep up the great work. Stay positive, test negative, as I say.
All right, thank you, Jeff. What a tremendous panel. And Jeff, first of all, so thank you for doing such a fantastic job for bringing out all of this information for my panelists and really delving deep. And of course, you know, panelists, thank you again. It's great to see you all and appreciate all.